Hi, and welcome to today's session. My name is Luis Castillo, and I'm a technical manager at Optiv with our vulnerability management and remediation practice. Today, we're going to discuss how to build or enhance your vulnerability management program. We'll have some time for questions at the end of the presentation. The objectives for today are to obtain a refresher on vulnerability management, to receive an overview of what a VM program is and what its components look like, and to learn an approach to raise vulnerability management program maturity. Before we start, I want to review a basic definition for vulnerability management. We'll define vulnerability management, or VM, as a cyclical process of identifying, categorizing, prioritizing, and remediating operating system and applications vulnerabilities. And of course, we want to do this in order to improve our organization's security posture. As the definition indicates, VM is a cycle. We don't do this one time and then forget it. Unless your situation is unique, you're always dealing with new assets being added and therefore new vulnerabilities being discovered. You likely have a backlog of vulnerabilities right now that you are currently dealing with, trying to find ways to patch, remediate, or mitigate. Once you do that, you're going to find ways to validate that your fixes worked. And before you can claim victory for those that you have fixed, you're going to start the cycle all over again with new assets being added and new vulnerabilities being discovered. Now that we have a basic understanding of what VM is, what exactly is a program? What is a vulnerability management program? And why do we need one? I like using analogies to explain things. So I put together a fun analogy to help paint the picture of what a VM program is and why we need one. We'll start with our client CISO that is coming to us with a problem. She needs help. She wants to understand why she can't get a handle on her vulnerabilities. In order for us to help her, we need to understand her challenges just a little bit better. We want to know if her company has a mature VM program or not. Now, she thinks she has a very robust program that is in top shape. But upon further inspection, we find out that her program is struggling. It's in bad shape. It can barely run on its own. Either that, or perhaps she has some new shiny parts. Maybe she purchased a new tool, but no one really knows how to put it all together. In conclusion, our CISO client in this example needs to build or enhance her current vulnerability management program. Okay, so hopefully you found that fun analogy somewhat relatable. You or perhaps your clients may be in a situation like our CISO in the example. You may be wondering if your vulnerability management program is where it needs to be. But how would you know? Let's start with a basic definition of a VM program. We'll define a VM program as the coordinated set of activities, people, and resources that continuously and proactively identify, categorize, prioritize, and mitigate vulnerabilities. And as we said earlier, we want to do this to improve our security posture. The activities in the definition include your defined governance and processes. You need people in order to perform those activities. And you need resources like technology to help the people that are performing the activities. Also notice that you really don't need a Ferrari to start with. Most organizations just need a well-defined functional program to start. You are expected to continuously improve and mature your program, just like any other program. Now that we know what a VM program is, let's talk about why we need it. Well, for starters, we are dealing with an ever-expanding attack surface. corporate infrastructures have indeed become more complex. They make it difficult to achieve a complete visibility across ecosystem. Businesses rely on more software solutions and applications. Sure, they make it convenient and easier for clients and employees to access data and information, but they also vastly increase those companies' attack surface. And the APT is real. Well-organized and funded cybercriminals have indeed learned how to exploit these chains of vulnerabilities in systems and applications. Okay. Besides that, the job of the CISO is indeed to secure the organization's information assets. So one piece of the puzzle is to manage cyber risk. A VM program can help reduce the risk of being breached. It helps that by identifying and addressing those vulnerabilities and misconfigurations that exist in systems and applications. And there's also the issue of compliance. Most companies need to follow some type of regulatory requirements, and having a vulnerability management program that will help stay compliant is a way or a reason why you need one. Now, I would hope that most organizations are motivated by the risk reduction rather than the compliance, but compliance is still a valid reason why you will need one. Ultimately, a VM program should be an essential component of an overall cybersecurity risk management program. Okay, so what does a VM program look like? We have defined some functions and components of a VM program. On this slide, I'm going to describe at a high level what those components are, and hopefully this can help you start generating some questions about your own VM program and where it may be. Let's start with governance. Governance is essential for any program, not just the VM program. If there's no governance, then there's no direction. Organizations need to be structured not only to support, but also to promote cyber functions like VM across all your business entities. You need to have well-defined roles and responsibilities so that the right stakeholders can be accountable and responsible for activities. And you ultimately need to have skilled resources to do the job. Without a strategic vision of where you want to be, it would be hard to define goals. It would be hard to define a roadmap. It'd be hard to give direction to where your program needs to go. You need a policy and you need a set of standards that can define requirements for vulnerability management within your organization. And depending on your industry, you also might need to account for regulatory requirements, and your VM program needs to align to those requirements. Finally, you need to measure it in order to manage it. You need to define a good set of key performance indicators and key risk indicators. But just as importantly, you need a process to review the performance of your program and initiate some type of action to help you maintain or help your program stay optimized. Now, under operations, you need to have a well-defined and documented process or set of processes. These are the primary process steps. And if you can do these consistently and repeatedly, you're going to be getting different results every time. Discovery, that deals with the discovery of both assets and vulnerabilities. Analysis is where you bring multiple factors together, the vulnerabilities that you discover, asset information that you have available, and perhaps some threat intelligence to determine where your greatest risk is and help prioritize those findings. Remediation is the treatment of those vulnerabilities, and that can include anything from patching those findings or patching those vulnerabilities, implementing corrective actions if there are no patches available, or perhaps implementing alternate mitigations. In some cases, accepting the risk temporarily is a valid way to treat it. Validation will help you determine if your remediation actions are effective. And it could be as simple as rescanning those assets for the known vulnerabilities, or perhaps as involved as performing penetration tests or other security assessments. Reporting really cuts across all phases of operations. It includes reporting on assets, on vulnerabilities, on risk, and on remediation progress. We'll move to the technology stack now. This is really where most organizations like to go right away. They tend to ignore the governance functions and the processes. And yes, the use of technology will make your program more efficient. This is a given. The key, though, is, do you have the right technology to execute the tasks based on your situation? And is your technology optimized? We'll start with the sensors and the collectors. These are your typical scanners, your agents, or even passive monitors. It's anything that will collect a list of vulnerabilities that needs to be analyzed. Your monitoring engine is the tool or your console that allows you to fingerprint hosts and leverage vulnerability signatures that are based on those hosts that you have, and to set up rules for data collection and asset organization. If you have one of the common and industry standard tools out there, it comes with a monitoring engine. A correlation engine allows you to automate some of the analysis tasks. Now, some can perform simple matches between known vulnerabilities and identified assets, but there are some that can use additional data like asset information and threat intelligence to give you a risk-based view of your vulnerabilities. The big names in the industry are really making great progress in bringing these capabilities into their standard tools. Data visualization will help you do some of the analytics and some of the data modeling to help you slice and dice the data and create dashboards and other custom reporting. Once again, the big names out there have enhanced the reporting capabilities and are able to produce very elaborate dashboards and even look at how you're doing compared to your vertical industry. Remediation orchestration. This technology is really where things have been going for some time now, and it has the potential of taking your remediation activities even to the next level. These tools typically include a workflow system that allows you to track remediation progress, but some more advanced tools may indeed include capabilities that allow you to automate some of those remediation steps. Okay, we'll look at scope. The bottom line is, if you don't know what you need to protect, that's bad. If you do know what you need to protect, but you are not protecting it, that is also bad. Organizations need to take inventory of their assets and their environments to ensure that there are no gaps in coverage. And if you have some gaps, you need to make sure that you know what they are, and there's actions being taken to close those gaps. Okay. We'll move to the enablers and dependencies down below. IT systems and service management. Now, this section at the bottom is what we call the enablers or dependencies. They're not directly part of a vulnerability management program, but they are critical components to the success of a program. If an organization has deficiencies in any of those areas, it can and will impact the organization's ability to run a successful VM program. For example, if you don't have system or application administrators that can remediate or mitigate the vulnerabilities that are found, that's going to be a problem. If you don't have a good handle on your network and how it's segmented, your IP space, you don't have up-to-date diagrams or where things are and how they are connected, that will make things more challenging for you. If you don't have control of your asset inventory, if you have gaps, if you don't have ownership identified, that's going to be a problem. If you don't have patch management processes or a system, it will be hard to keep up with those patchable vulnerabilities. A change and release management process is going to help you carefully plan and implement some of the bigger changes that can potentially impact the rest of the environment. Problem management can help you deal with issues, or at minimum, provide a way to assign tasks to remediation teams. And risk management helps you take a look at a bigger picture of risk, which can indeed include helping getting the vulnerability information to make the right decisions. Okay, we'll look at the right-hand side now. Here's where we have other related disciplines that can, and in some cases should, integrate with your VM program in order to provide a more complete picture. I'm not going to cover all of them, but I'll pick a couple to talk about. Let's pick, for example, threat intelligence. That's a big one. This can be integrated into your VM program, and it will help you in the analysis phase. It can help drive that risk-based prioritization to that next level. Now, there's a lot of assessments listed on that list. Many of those tests and assessments can produce findings that could be incorporated into that same analysis phase. Now, going the other way, vulnerability findings can feed information to implement security controls at the endpoint or at the network level. Okay, we'll look at the bottom part. These are other related disciplines under information technology. Similarly to those disciplines in security, some of these IT disciplines can and should integrate well with your VM program. For example, if you have any type of gold image process, you would want to look at vulnerabilities in that gold image before you create new instances of systems. If you are a software development shop, you'd want to integrate some sort of code scan or vulnerability scan as part of your SDLC. Okay, I know that was a lot of information, but I hope that going through each of those functions and describing some of the components can really start to trigger some questions in your head about whether or not your vulnerability management is where it needs to be. Okay, so let's cover this last piece of our presentation. Now that we have a much better idea of what components are part of a VM program, what do organizations need to do to build or enhance what they have? Well, first things first, organizations need to know what it is that they have. They need to develop a current state view of their program. That is an unbiased review of those program components that we talked about in the previous slide, so that they can determine what they're doing now and then map what they want to do in the future, in that future ideal state, and then help identify those gaps in between to get from where they are to where they need to be. Next, organizations need to develop or improve their VM governance model. And you gotta do that in a way that is aligned with your organization's needs. And we covered those pieces that are part of the governance model in the last slide. Next thing is you need to develop policies and procedures that are based on that governance model. If technology is not deployed or it needs to be optimized, then organizations need to clearly define those operational requirements that they want to achieve and develop a technology design that can meet those. Once the design is in place, then deployment and configuration of the technology is going to follow. Finally, instituting a program optimization process will help organizations review at some frequency the effectiveness of their VM program. And that will allow them to take corrective actions to optimize it. One final comment that I'll make on this slide, and that is, building a mature VM program doesn't happen overnight. There are many elements that will dictate how much can be done and how fast. Organizations have budgets and many priorities really that they require and that need investment. There are also organizational and cultural challenges that can slow down progress. Some companies are still struggling with allowing their CISO to be part of the big table. They don't have a seat at the big table, and that makes it challenging. Trying to convince business leaders across different lines of businesses that investing in security is just as important as investing and growing their business can be a tough sell. And what organizations can do is define that roadmap and those clear initiatives with targets that can be part of their strategic plan. Okay, we got to the summary slide. We have come to the end of our presentation, and I hope that you found it useful and informative. My goals was that you, the audience, would have obtained a refresher on vulnerability management, and that is the cyclical process that is used to identify, categorize, prioritize, and mitigate vulnerabilities. Another goal was that you would receive an overview of what a VM program is and review the components of a VM program. The functions that are part of a VM program include governance, operational, and technology. Added with scope, there's dependencies, and there's interfaces to other disciplines, whether they are security or IT disciplines. And last, my goal was that you would learn an approach to raise vulnerability program maturity. You need to have a methodology to assess what your current state looks like, and then to design and implement those vulnerability management program components where you have gaps. Thank you very much for attending today's session. And we are now officially open for questions.